In my mid-20s, I discovered 1984 and was fascinated by it. Even at that age, I could see how it related to the world of the 1990s, and of course, even more so to today's society. With constant surveillance through cameras, oversharing on social media, and news being manipulated to fit the agendas of the companies that own it, Orwell's predictions have almost become a reality. While George Orwell believed it would be the government taking control of our lives, I think it's corporations. The rest, he got right. George Orwell was born Eric Arthur Blair on June 25, 1903, in India, the son of Ida and Richard Blair. His father worked in Bengal as a sub-deputy opium agent in the opium department of the Indian Civil Service. Orwell described his family as lower upper middle class. Eric was the middle child of three, with one sister 5 years older and another 5 years younger. When he was 1 year old, his mother moved the children to England. After moving to England as a young boy, he was sent to St. Cyprian's School, a boarding school in Eastbourne, East Sussex. Eric did not have many friends there and found his time at the school difficult. Even at that young age, he was keenly aware of how he was treated because his family was less wealthy than many other students. Throughout his youth, Eric would write poems and stories. While at St. Cyprian's, Eric wrote 2 poems that were published in the Henley and South Oxfordshire Standard. He came second in the Harrow History Prize, had his work praised by the school's external examiner, and earned scholarships to Wellington and Eton. It was at the prestigious Eton College where it is believed many of his views on social issues began to take shape. In December 1921, he left Eton to join the Indian Imperial Police in Burma, where he rose through the ranks to become the head of the police force. His time in Burma deepened his lifelong critique of imperialism, as he observed firsthand the stark contrast between the privileged British elite and the colonized population. Eric tried to bridge the gap between these two worlds. While working his way up the ranks of the Imperial Police, he also took the time to learn the Burmese language, something many of his peers did not. In 1927, Eric contracted dengue fever and returned to England. Back with his family, he decided to resign from the police and focus on writing. He moved to London and began to use the pen name George Orwell. To better understand and accurately depict the struggle faced by society's poorest, George Orwell made the deliberate decision to live as they did. He spent nights in squalid lodging houses, dressed in ragged clothes, and lived as a tramp in London and Paris. In London, he wandered the streets, slept in overcrowded shelters, and ate in charitable soup kitchens. In Paris, he worked a series of grueling and poorly paid jobs, including washing dishes in the basement kitchens of high-end restaurants. This experience not only provided him with material for his writing, but also helped shape his empathy for the working class and his fierce criticism of social injustice. His first book, Down and Out in Paris and London, documented his experiences living among the poor and marginalized. In his novel The Road to Wigan Pier, published in 1937, Orwell documented the harsh living conditions of the working class in the industrial north of England. He described in vivid detail the overcrowded and unsanitary housing, the dangerous and exhausting work in coal mines, and the struggles faced by families barely managing to survive on meager wages. Orwell's observations were deeply empathetic, and he expressed both outrage at the social injustices he witnessed and concern over the systematic poverty that plagued the working class. Orwell moved to Barcelona in 1936 when the Spanish Civil War broke out. A staunch anti-fascist, he volunteered to fight for the Republicans, aligning himself with the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification. Orwell fought on multiple fronts during the war. He spent approximately 6 months fighting before a sniper hit him in the throat, and he was taken to the hospital for recovery. The bullet had barely missed his main artery. He spent nearly a month in the hospital. His experiences in Spain were documented in Homage to Catalonia, where he wrote of being shot, saying, There seemed to be a loud bang and a blinding flash of light around me, and I felt tremendous shock. No pain, only a violent shock. The continuing changes to the political situation in Barcelona, and after being accused of being a spy, Orwell and his wife were forced to leave Spain. It wasn't long after returning from Spain that World War II broke out. Orwell was considered unfit to fight, so he joined the Home Guard in 1940. He would also work for the BBC, writing propaganda to support the war effort in India. He also contributed to the Partisan Review, Tribune, and wrote reviews for books and plays. In September of 1943, Orwell resigned from the BBC, feeling that most Indians were not hearing the broadcast. The time at the BBC was not for nothing, however, as it contributed to his ideas for the Ministry of Truth. George Orwell is most famously known for two works. The first, Animal Farm, was published in 1945. The novella is a satirical fable about a group of farm animals who overthrow their human masters. Orwell drew upon the betrayal of revolutionary ideas in the Soviet Union, and the novel led him to global fame. His most famous work, of course, is 1984. The novel explores themes of surveillance, propaganda, and the consequences of unchecked political power, creating a vision of society that remains relevant to this day. Set in the world of Oceania, the story follows Winston Smith, an ordinary man who secretly rebels against the omnipresent party and its leader, Big Brother. Through Winston's struggle, Orwell illustrates the psychological and physical toll of living under constant surveillance and manipulation. The narrative delves into how the state uses fear, language distortion, and historical revisionism to suppress free thought and maintain its grip on power. Orwell's haunting portrait serves as a warning about the fragility of individual freedom in the face of authoritarianism. George Orwell never considered himself an attractive man, yet he seemed to have various relationships during his life, both in Burma and England. In the spring of 1935, Orwell met Eileen O'Shaughnessy, and the two married the following year, on June 9, 1936. Eileen was a devoted wife to a temperamental writer, enduring what would even then be considered harsh living conditions. Their home in Wallington, Hertfordshire, was a small 300-year-old cottage with no electricity. It was cold, damp, and lacked basic amenities, including requiring them to use an outdoor privy. Although she was overshadowed by her famous husband, Eileen played a crucial role in supporting Orwell's writing. She typed up his manuscripts and cared for him as he frequently suffered from ill health. In early 1937, during the Spanish Civil War, Eileen joined Orwell in Spain, volunteering in the leadership office. She visited him whenever possible, even nursing him after he was wounded. During the Second World War, Eileen worked in the censorship department of the Ministry of Information in London. In early 1942, she switched jobs to work at the Ministry of Food. George had always wanted children, but the couple were unable to conceive. It was believed that Orwell was sterile. Eventually, they adopted Richard Horatio Blair. Eileen was initially unsure about raising a child if they could not have one of their own, but both she and George grew to love Richard deeply. Eileen left her position at the Ministry of Food to care for their family. As Orwell's fame began to rise, he traveled to mainland Europe as a correspondent. While he was away in 1945, Eileen became ill. She underwent surgery for a hysterectomy on March 29, 1945, but tragically died under anesthesia. She had not given Orwell much notice about the operation because she expected to make a speedy recovery. Even though he was deeply saddened by the death of his wife, Orwell was also responsible for the care of young Richard and soon began to consider remarriage. His own health was also in decline, as he often suffered from illness. Frequently, he would leave London to recuperate. In 1946 and again in 1947, he moved to an abandoned farmhouse on the island of Jura. It was during the winter of 1947 that he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. In 1949, he was admitted to a sanatorium in Gloucestershire. Also in 1949, Orwell married Sonia Brownell from his hospital bed at University College Hospital in London. They were together for only a few short months before his death. Sonia managed Orwell's affairs and devotedly attended to him in the hospital. Friends of Orwell, such as Anthony Powell, noted that Sonia helped him through the painful last months of his life and cheered him up significantly. However, some have suggested that she may have been attracted to him primarily for his fame. On January 21st, 1950, an artery burst in Orwell's lung, and he passed away moments later at the age of 46. Eric Arthur Blair is buried in the churchyard of All Saints in Sutton, Courtenay. George Orwell's work endures because it is a stark reminder of the importance of truth and the ever-present dangers of authoritarianism. In a world where the lines between fact and fiction are increasingly blurred, Orwell's voice against oppression remains as relevant as ever.